Every single day, millions of people all over the world see that iconic three-pointed star out on the road. It's basically the ultimate emblem of prestige, right? It's on the cars of world leaders, movie stars, billionaires. It sparkles in those slick, high-end commercials and sits proudly on the hoods of some of the most expensive vehicles on the planet. But if we actually peel back that glossy, luxurious facade, the true origin of this legendary brand is a story most people have never heard.
And it really begs this fascinating question. How exactly did a kid who grew up in grinding poverty, completely devoid of privilege, manage to build the ultimate global symbol of wealth? Well, the story we're diving into in today's Explainer proves that greatness rarely comes from the places you expect. It's an unbelievable story of persistence, a mother's massive sacrifice, and a remarkably courageous woman.
Let's break this down for a second and look at the stark contrast here. On one side, we have our modern perception, the sheer luxury we instantly associate with the Mercedes-Benz name today. But on the flip side, we have the historical reality of its founder, Karl Benz, because behind that shining, expensive emblem is a very gritty human truth rooted in poverty, crippling debt, and a boy who grew up never even knowing his father's face.
All right, let's jump into part one, behind the three-pointed star. So picture this. Karl Benz is born in 1844 near Carlsberg, Germany. Just 2 years later, in 1846, tragedy hits hard. His father, who is a railway worker, catches pneumonia and suddenly passes away, leaving his mother totally alone with a toddler and virtually zero money. But his mother makes this incredible, selfless decision. She basically starves herself, denying even the most basic necessities just to afford Karl's education. By the 1860s, thanks entirely to her silent, immense sacrifices, a young Karl actually manages to enroll in a polytechnic school. Without her giving up absolutely everything, this boy would have remained an unknown laborer, and the automobile as we know it might never have existed.
Fast forward a bit, and that brings us to 1871. This is a huge, pivotal year. Karl finally opens his own small mechanical workshop in the city of Mannheim. Now, don't picture some glamorous tech startup here. The reality was brutal. Orders were practically non-existent, money was incredibly tight, and his business was constantly teetering right on the very edge of bankruptcy. His early partners actually thought his obsession with building a self-driving carriage was absolute madness, so they just abandoned him. He's drowning in debt, totally alone with this seemingly impossible dream. Which brings us to part two, the myth of the lone genius. You know how history just loves to paint this picture of Karl Benz as the sole mastermind working all alone in a dark shop? Yeah, well, that tired lone genius trope is completely shattered by reality. Enter Bertha Benz. When they met, she didn't just become his wife. She became his absolute financial savior, his fiercest advocate, and a brilliant technical partner. In an era when women were strictly expected to just stay home and manage the house, Bertha was right there poring over blueprints and co-engineering the future with Karl. In fact, right here in 1872, Bertha takes her entire dowry, her own personal wealth, and injects it directly into Karl's failing workshop. This single act quite literally saved the business from going under. Without her money and without her absolute unwavering belief in his crazy idea of a self-driving carriage, Karl's experiments would have just abruptly ended right then and there. But thanks to Bertha keeping the lights on, we arrive at one of the most important dates in human history, January 29, 1886. This was the exact day Karl Benz was officially granted the patent for his three-wheeled motor wagon. This single, unassuming document is universally recognized today as the official birth certificate of the automobile. He had actually done it. He built a machine with an internal combustion engine, ignition, and cooling that moved entirely under its own power. Moving on to part three, Bertha Benz's first road trip. This is where it gets really good. So, a really crucial point here is that this invention was absolutely not an instant global triumph. When Karl brought his car out, the public completely hated it. People mocked him in the streets. The loud, backfiring engine terrified the locals and spooked their horses. The church viewed the machine with deep suspicion, and commercial sales were sitting at zero. A big fat zero. Karl, who was naturally introverted and prone to depression anyway, was completely crushed. He practically gave up on his own invention and literally tried to hide it away in the workshop. But Bertha realized that if she didn't do something drastic, and I mean right now, her husband's life's work would just end up as a forgotten footnote in history. So, early one morning in August 1888, without telling Karl a single word, Bertha packed up her two teenage sons,
quietly pushed the motor wagon out of the workshop so they wouldn't wake him up, and set off on a secret, desperate road trip of over 100 kilometers to visit her mother. She knew that to prove the car wasn't just a loud toy, she had to show the world it could survive a real, grueling journey. And the trip brilliantly illustrates her absolute mechanical genius. Remember, we are talking about a time with no paved roads, no mechanics, and zero spare parts. When the fuel line clogged up with dirt, what does she do? She uses her long hatpin to clear it. When an ignition wire stripped and started shorting out, she literally took off her own garter to insulate it. And most incredibly, when the wooden brakes started failing on these steep downhill slopes, she stopped at a local cobbler in a tiny village and had him nail thick leather strips to the wooden blocks. She literally invented the world's first brake pads on the fly.
And what about fuel? Because there obviously weren't any gas stations in 1888. She had to stop at a local pharmacy in a town called Wieslach to buy ligroin, which is a petroleum-based cleaning solvent, just to use as fuel. That tiny pharmacy inadvertently became the world's very first gas station. By the time she reached her mother's house at dusk and sent a telegram back to a stunned Karl, she had done it. She generated massive sensational press. The world suddenly realized the automobile was a practical, incredible tool, and the orders finally started pouring in. Bertha literally saved the company. Okay, let's pivot a bit. Part 4, Benz and Daimler, great rivals.
There is a huge misconception out there that Karl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler were friends who teamed up to start a company. The reality couldn't be further from the truth. They were actually fierce, bitter competitors, working just 100 kilometers apart from each other. And astonishingly, historical records suggest these two founding fathers of the automotive industry probably never even met face to face. You see, these two men had totally different engineering philosophies. Karl Benz was entirely focused on designing a complete integrated automobile right from the ground up. On the other hand, Gottlieb Daimler and his brilliant partner Wilhelm Maybach, they were obsessed with building highly versatile, lightweight internal combustion engines. They basically just wanted to build a killer motor that you could attach to anything, a carriage, a boat, or even an airship. They were two totally separate tracks of innovation, fiercely competing for the exact same wealthy customers.
All right, part 5, the girl who named the car. I absolutely love this part. So it all starts with a guy named Emil Jelinek. He was an incredibly wealthy entrepreneur, a high society diplomat, and an absolute fanatic for speed. Jelinek started buying Daimler's cars, racing them, and more importantly, selling them to the absolute highest echelons of European society. He was moving so much product that he essentially became a major influencer over Daimler's engineering, demanding faster and more powerful vehicles. Right at the turn of the century, Jelinek commissioned an entirely new high-performance sports car from Daimler. But he had one strict condition for placing this massive order. The new model had to be named after his beloved 11-year-old daughter. Her name? Mercedes. The car was an absolute sensation. The name sounded elegant, it rolled right off the tongue, so Daimler just kept using it for all their premium cars. It is just such a beautiful, poignant irony that this hyper-masculine, engineering-heavy global powerhouse is named purely out of deep fatherly love for a little girl who had absolutely nothing to do with cars. Which brings us to our final chapter, Part 6, Birth of a Legendary Union. Let's jump to 1926 and see how this all builds into the brand we know today. Following the absolute devastation of World War I, Germany was plunged into a severe economic crisis. Hyperinflation was literally destroying the country, and nobody had the money to buy luxury automobiles. To survive this catastrophic financial environment, these two fierce, lifelong rival companies realized they had no choice. In 1926, the Benz company and the Daimler company formally merged, uniting their legacies to form Mercedes-Benz. They combined the three-pointed star of Daimler with the laurel wreath of Benz, creating an unstoppable automotive juggernaut. And you know, Karl Benz actually lived to see this incredible triumph. He passed away in 1929 as an elderly man surrounded by immense respect and honor. He got to watch his empire flourish. But we really have to remember, that empire wasn't born from trust funds or high society connections. Not at all. It was forged in the fires of childhood poverty, made possible only by a mother who starved to educate him, and secured by a wife who strapped her kids into an untested, explosive machine and drove off into the unknown just to prove the world wrong. And that leaves us with this final, powerful question to reflect on today. When you strip away the luxury, the glitz, and the celebrity endorsements, the origin of Mercedes-Benz is just a deeply, incredibly human story. It proves for sure that greatness doesn't require a perfect start.
So looking at the monumental legacy built by a fatherless boy and an impossibly brave woman, ask yourself, what could you achieve with nothing but a dream and a totally stubborn refusal to give up?